Greetings. Here we go. Namo Amida Bu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Nice to talk to you again.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much. The passages that helped so much to remind me. That one where Iconkobai Sensei, I think it's Iconkobai Sensei actually says this, that listening, like after he explains how hearing, like what we were talking about at the last session, Dharma discussion, that hearing is faith. Hearing the Dharma without doubt is faith. That is faith. And then he explains that, and he goes on to say, listening until you have no doubts, and listening until you reach a state where you have no doubts is extremely difficult. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because you don't often hear that kind of part of it. You took the discussion of it's, this path is the greatest difficulty of all difficulties, or whatever it is. That did Shinran say that, or
Shinran says that it's accepting this. Well, it comes from the larger sutra where Shakyamuni says accepting this teaching and faith is the most difficult of all difficulties, and nothing surpasses this difficulty. But Shinran sort of interprets that to mean receiving Shinjin. Yeah. Actually, attaining Shinjin is the most difficult of all difficulties. So, yeah.
But that I have to remind myself that is said, because it's been 15 years off and on that I've been, and it has been very difficult. It's very difficult to listen, to do the deeply listening, work with the teacher, and not get frustrated, and not allow my frustration, my impatience, my lack of attention, my lack of discipline, my anger, to get the better of me, and then stop. While doing it, questions arise. Like every time I read, question will arise or a doubt will arise. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, what is this getting me any closer to? Yeah.
Well, doubts and questions arising is part of the process, right?
Yeah.
And then finding someone, someone who is a good teacher who can address those doubts and questions that you have is, another hard thing, since such people are very rare, I have found. I mean, even in Japan, where, Shin Buddhism is widely, known, and, it's a major school of Buddhism here in Japan, it's still hard to find a good teacher who, first has the knowledge of the, teaching, and then also is a person of himself or herself, a person of Shinjin, who can actually guide you instead of just having an intellectual, academic perspective,
So. Yeah, exactly. So I'm very grateful for, the people that I have found where I could do that, like Paul Roberts, Josho Sensei, and Kobai Sensei, and yourself, that I can discuss these with as a friend on the path. It's rare. Like there's not, if you go on the internet, you're trying to find it. Those are, it's very, very slim.
Yeah, and a lot of the Jodo Shinshu groups and schools on the internet sometimes are kind of not exactly orthodox either.
Most of the time they're not. Most of the time either they're mixed practice. They actually say, they claim to be Shin Buddhism, or they claim to be, Jodo Shinshu, but it's actually mixed practice or totally modernist perspective.
Yeah.
That
exactly.
Totally unhelpful either way. And totally against, like, it actually, not only is it unhelpful, it's counter to the teaching. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that those passages, well, first, I'm glad I was able to find them. They actually weren't in Understanding Jodo Shinshu. They were in Kobai Sensei's other two books. And the first one in particular actually is from The True and Real World of Salvation. And I actually would recommend that book to you, especially since it's a bit more easy to read, I guess, than Understanding Jodo Shinshu, and that it's not quite as doctrinally dense or technical. It's more of a kind of a introductory type book, I would say. So, in that, they're all of his books in the English translation, which was actually done by a Japanese American, are all available online too. So you can probably get them from the same website. I don't know, where are you reading them?
From wherever I can Kobai Sensei, the links he's given me.
Okay, so then it's the same site then.
Yeah, same site, and also he has like a little study center thing that he, like, little website he created. And so there's two different places, but they're both links that he gave me. So yeah, there's a section just his books, and then there's a section that, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so probably the same link in there. You should be able to find the True and Real World of Salvation. And I think this is an interesting quote passage, because he talks about, the critique that now, because we have modern, astronomy and science and so forth, it's hard for modern people to believe in the Pure Land and that kind of argument or perspective. But he says that the reason that people, even 500 years ago or more, back in Rinyo Shonin's time and Shinran Shonin's time, were able to believe in the Pure Land wasn't because, they didn't have, telescopes, or they were ignorant or naive or something like that, but because they, had a religious experience of, Amida Buddha and Shinjin. And that was what enabled them to, encounter and believe in the Pure Land as a religious reality. Kobai Sensei often points out that, the Pure Land isn't a scientific reality. It's not like if we built a rocket ship, we could, and flew for, an infinite amount of distance through space, we would, come to the Pure Land eventually. It's not that kind of, it's, Kobai Sensei likes to emphasize that it's a subjective or religious, reality that we have to experience through, the experience of Shinjin and through hearing, the Dharma. So I think that's a good point that he makes in that book as well. And of course, the important point here is what he says: do not seek merit in the act of hearing. And this is hard because, you hear in Jodo Shinshu that the way to Shinjin is through hearing, right? So what our minds tend to do is think, okay, so now if I listen for a certain amount for so long, I'm going to get it, It's like we have this, we want to expect this result, that we are going to get from doing. And that's a mistake, because then we're turning it into a calculation. So we're turning it into something that in itself is our mind trying to calculate, okay, how can I get Shinjin, which isn't how it works. It's a, I think in the, what was it called? The Primer of Shin Buddhism, it talks about how Shinjin is it's a purely a thing that comes to us from the side of Amida Tathagata. So it's not something we can, trick ourselves into getting,
Although I have done, although I have tricked myself. I have convinced myself. I have, in my sort of frustration and desperation, reached points where 3 or 4 times this has happened, where I just wanted it so bad that I convinced myself I had Shinjin somehow. And in the past, that lasted for, a few days, maybe a couple of weeks, and then eventually the reality would sink in that no, you don't.
Yeah.
But this most recent time where I did that, it lasted like a year, where I just suppressed. I just said, "Oh, that's just my monkey mind. I'm just gonna ignore." Like, I just made this decision to ignore my doubts and my questions, and just, you know what I mean? And that was my own doing, out of my own desperation and frustration and impatience and wanting it so badly that I literally convinced myself. I literally tricked myself that I had Shinjin, and did not. And anyway, it was anyway, that's where we got to the point where I'm no longer in the Sangha, and that was and it's almost my own doing. It's all my own, completely.
Well, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself.
I don't blame it on anybody else, but it's my own. Anyway, so what were we going to say? Sorry.
Well, what I was going to say is the point. Maybe the point of that experience you had is that it's not uncommon, right?
Yeah.
And people, I think, want, because it's something, if you turn Shinjin into something that you, you want so much that you're willing to kind of lie to yourself, and say, I've got it, and maybe you don't. So the real thing is not to suppress. The real trick is not to suppress your doubts and questions, but to, face them head on and resolve them, and, decide if, and you have to ask, is this answer, or is this resolution to my doubts and questions really enough for me? Because I've had people, teachers, friends who I've had in the past and even now, whose answers don't necessarily, it might be a good answer for somebody, but it's not necessarily an answer that is satisfying to me. So if it doesn't satisfy me, and if it doesn't address my doubt or question, then it's not really useful for me. So in that case, you have to find somebody else who can maybe add some perspective, or even, through your own, reading and reflection, hopefully inspired by, the Dharma, arrive at some, conclusion on your own. So, but, I mean, there have been some definite cases of people who, for the longest time, said that they were people, that they had Shinjin, and other people said that they had Shinjin, and then in the end, they gave it all up and went and converted to some other religion. So there's a actually Paul Roberts' friend, Richard.
That's what I knew. That's
St. Clair.
Yeah, I knew that's where you're.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened.
He gave up on the whole thing, and I can't say that I blame him. I think it is difficult for people in the West, or in America or Europe or non-Japanese countries. It's difficult if you don't have the context of there's the language barrier for one thing. There's a limit to how much is available in English. You don't necessarily have, a temple nearby, or, a priest that you can go to with your questions and concerns. So it's hard to stick with it in not, outside of Japan. I think. I mean, I don't think it's an easy path, really. I mean, like, for example, if you're a Roman Catholic in America, or there's a dozen churches right outside your door. There are there are priests and friends, and it's easy to be a Roman Catholic in the West, but not so easy to be a Shin Buddhist, and especially since even within Buddhism, Shin Buddhism is so rare.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I mean, I think I'm actually surprised when people stick with Shin Buddhism for any amount of time, because I'm so used to seeing people come and go, and and even sometimes people will convince themselves I have Shinjin now, and then they go and do something totally else. I had a friend on Facebook who was all about, I'm now a person of Shinjin, and then he went and became a Hindu or something like that. Like, and people go around and around and around, which it's fine. It's they're on their spiritual path, right? But I think people who actually stick with Shintoism are probably rare, in my opinion. And
yeah.
So the fact that you're still here after 15 years is, I think, a rare thing.
I mean, I wasn't for all that 15 years, I wasn't solely focused on Jodo Shinshu. It was for the first, I'd say, few years of that, it was more traditional Pure Land teaching.
Okay.
And then, I saw the mixing, the mixed aspect of that. I'm like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of, and then I finally found Jodo, and I was like, oh, okay, there we go. That makes sense, also during that time, and I would go back and forth with between the Jodo Shinshu and Chinese Pure Land, and also during that whole time, also I was looking at Tendai and Nichiren.
Oh, okay.
Buddhism, and Nichiren Buddhism as kind of a sect of Tendai, almost. Like it's really kind of almost like a refined kind of, or a what I mean, aspect of Tendai. Probably that would, if Tendai Buddhists or Nichiren Buddhists heard me say that, they probably wouldn't be very happy. But either way.
Well, it is true, because they both have the Lotus Sutra as the highest sutra par excellence. So,
and the reason I focused on that too was because it's also a Mappo, especially Nichiren, a Mappo Buddhist tradition. That Mappo is a very important part of that. So that was another thing that drew me, to it.
Right.
So so it wasn't totally solely focused on, but a lot of the time I was focused on Pure Land Buddhism, off and on.
Yeah, Nichiren Buddhism is also very popular in Western countries. I use the term Western very loosely. I referring to Europe and the United States, and
Really?
UK. Australia. I actually don't know a whole lot about Nichiren Buddhism, to be honest. I do know a little bit. I know that Nichiren wasn't a fan of Pure Land Buddhism.
No, definitely not. Very, very much.
But I do think Nichiren Buddhism is, it's a great tradition of Japanese, Buddhism that is very, I'd like to learn more about it actually, but I've never really had the chance to study it very much. I have, actually, when I was studying at Yokohama National University as an exchange student, I did have the opportunity to participate in a zazen kai, a Zen meditation session at a temple in Kamakura, and that was, a really interesting learning experience. That I still, and I made some good friends actually with the abbot of the temple, and also another priest of another Rinzai shu. It's Rinzai is in Buddhism, yeah, and I'm still friends with him on Facebook.
Kamakura Buddhism. I said
Kamakura Buddhism, yeah.
It's a huge thing, isn't it? It's a huge thing, I'd say, in the world. The different things that arose out of that time period are a massive part of the Buddhist tradition and what people know of Buddhism. Whether it's Zen or and not that Zen arose out of the time, but the very significant aspect that people think of as that Zen came out of that period, and Nichiren Buddhism and of course Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is a thing. But anyway, coming back to where were we? We were talking about the greatest difficulty of all difficulties.
Yes.
That's so it is rare. I think it's very rare that people stick around. It must be rare, even rare still, for someone like me who still doesn't have Shinjin and has persevered off and on, but then ultimately stays with it. And I'm bound and determined this time I will not. I'm to ask all my questions and to express all my doubts and discuss them, and not suppress them, not ignore them. So that's hence we're talking. Hence Kobai Sensei referred me to you as an English speaker. And
that's great. And just cool.
You're actually in Japan. So anyway, sorry.
I am in Japan in my tiny apartment. And I can always, I do tend to meet Kobai Sensei a few times, maybe a couple times a year. So, if in our discussions, questions arise that, I don't know the answers to, we can always, I can always consult with Kobai Sensei directly as well. So.
Yeah, that would be good. That's, kind of what I want to keep it, sort of that connection as part of, definitely as part of, to keep that, keep the teacher involved,
Well, it's important because I'm not, an ordained priest in Jodo Shinshu. I did receive, I think, as I mentioned, Kyoshiki from Nishi Honganji, but I'm not I haven't received a Tokudo yet. I'm on the fence about, hopefully I'll have an opportunity to do so, but it's a bit of a process. You have to go through quite a bit of, and I haven't had the opportunity to this point. But. So so my point is we need to keep someone with more knowledge than I have in the conversation.
That's exactly. And you have, as far as I'm concerned, you have a lot of knowledge. As far as compared to myself, you have a lot of knowledge and understanding of the teachings, and so I'm very grateful for. I'm glad to be able to have these discussions. Friend on the path, as they say.
And I am happy to share, whatever knowledge I've gained over the past 10 years of, learning Jodo Shinshu, and also the what is it? Chuobukyo Gakuin, the correspondence course I took. It's a three-year course, and that is interesting because you don't just learn the doctrine and the teaching, but also what's it called? Otstome, or chanting. The liturgy and so on. That if you go to a Jodo Shinshu temple, well, I'm sure you already know, but the basically in Jodo Shinshu, it's really not the temple that is the center. It's the home, the individual home, and then in Japanese homes, especially if they're devout Buddhists, there's always the obutsudan, which is like, as you know, that where you enshrine the Buddhist statue or Buddhist image. And in Jodo Shinshu, that's really the center of, kind of lay devotion, I would say. Not. I mean, the temple is important too, but and actually today is this kind of a special day in Japan because it's Hoonko.
Oh,
the Thanksgiving service for Shinran Shonin.
Oh, okay.
So at the head temple in Kyoto, there's a large, a very elaborate, very beautiful service that they do for, it's basically the memorial service for Shinran Shonin. So it's kind of like the most important, by far the most important Dharma service in Jodo Shinshu.
Okay.
And but yeah, the basic service that we do in Jodo Shinshu was established by Rinyo Shonin, and it consists of Shoshinge, which is from the end of the basically the hymn or the poem at the end of the chapter on practice in Kyogyo Shinsho, written by Shinran Shonin. And then after Shoshinge, we chant 6 verses from the hymns, or the wasan, they're called, but the Japanese hymns that Shinran Shonin wrote. And there are three books of those hymns, which is the hymns of the Pure Land, the hymns of the master, the 7 Dharma masters, the 7 Pure Land masters, and also the hymns of the 3 Dharma ages. So the age of the right Dharma, the age of the semblance Dharma, and then the age of the ending Dharma, or Mappo. And that's all in the English translation, of course, is all in the collected works of Shinran. But that service is basically all in Japanese, so you won't necessarily understand it unless you practice it. But it's very beautiful, and if you're interested, maybe sometime I could also probably send you some resources that might help you to learn how it's done as well.
So that's another way to deeply listen, then, is to be part of that. You can is to in whatever way you can participate in the liturgy. Is that kind of?
Yeah. I mean, I think so myself. When I was living in Kyoto, I actually would I would participate in the morning service at Nishi Honganji, the head temple there in Kyoto. And it was really an interesting experience. It was freezing cold, though, at 6 o'clock in the morning. And there's no air conditioning. It was the middle of winter, if you can imagine. So, and almost no one, not many people would participate. But I did make really good friends with the gentlemen who participated like every day. They were always there in the front, row. And that we would, do Rinyo Shonin's liturgy, which is actually, I said there were 2 parts to it, but there's a more important part as well, which is after Shoshinge. Well, first you would do in the Amida Hall, which is where the image of Amida Buddha is enshrined, we would recite a hymn from the larger sutra. And then everyone, you actually move to across this like little bridge to the Founders Hall, which is the hall that enshrines the image of Shinran Shonin. And there we would recite Shoshinge and the hymns. And then after that, there would be a brief address by one of the priests. And then another very important reading is Gobunsho, so Rinyo Shonin's letters. Always would be the last thing that would be read in the service. So, and of course, it's all in Japanese. So, you know, and it's Gobunsho, for example, is very old Japanese. But the principle is that all of this is directly the words of Shinran, the words of, you know, written by Rinyo Shonin. So that's a very important aspect, I think. And for us who don't necessarily know Japanese that well, reading the English translation, you know, is the next best thing, I think. And Kobai Sensei often, you know, emphasizes too, when you think, you know, listening to the Dharma doesn't just mean like studying Jodo Shinshu doctrine, although that's important, but also listening in our daily lives. You know, anything can become an opportunity to hear the Dharma, not necessarily this one. So I wouldn't think, you know, I have to hear the Dharma in this particular way. There's many, you know, ways that you can hear it. And part of it is finding the way that is best for you, you know. Whether that's, you know, reflecting when you're taking a walk on the beach, or, you know, maybe you have an interest in learning how to chant the sutras, or, you know, something like that. So
I often do it when I'm walking. I often listen when I'm walking, you know, listen to recordings, or I'm sort of reflecting, you know, on the teachings as I'm walking. It's not a practice or anything. It's just, you know, I'm thinking about it. That's often what I'm doing. I mean, a lot of the time, that's what I'm doing. You know, it's on my mind all the time. Or a lot of the time, it's just on my mind. But I wanted to say about the liturgy. It sounds is that you mentioned it's all the key sort of teachings. It's very comprehensive. All those different stages, and it covers like so much of the
it's like the
entirety of the teaching in one service, kind of thing.
Especially starting, you know, with the larger sutra and before the image of Amida Buddha, and then we move on to Shinran Shonin, where you hear the entire, in Shoshinge, it's the entire doctrine of Jodo Shinshu, you know, starting from the larger sutra all the way down through all of the Pure Land masters, and then, you know, finishing with hymns that praise the Pure Land in the Pure Land masters, and then finally Rinyo Shonin's, you know, coming later, Rinyo Shonin's letters. So now that I actually just realized this myself, now that you mentioned this, it's like the entire, you know, history, the entire doctrine of Jodo Shinshu is contained in this one service. That is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's great. That's great. So so on this topic, did you find any other passages that you thought would be helpful to talk about or share?
Yeah, actually, so one brief thing I wanted to discuss was you kind of, well, you mentioned, you know, what way should we listen? How should we listen? You know, I think was your correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was part of your question.
Yeah, what's the attitude? What's the approach one should? Attitude and the approach one should take was essentially what I was trying to ask. Yeah. So, you know, if it's not doing it, and you're not trying to accumulate merit, you're not trying to open yourself to the Dharma.
Mhm.
What is the, so what are you doing then? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? Because here, this is one thing I wanted to bring up. Because like everything else in life, in samsara, is you got to think something to say something, something to do something. You got to do something to get something done. Like it's cause and effect.
Yeah.
So that's this reality that we unfortunately,
Right.
because of our
Right.
ignorance and blind passions and attachments and
Yeah.
evil and wretch minds. So everything in this, we have to do something to get something done. Do you know what I mean? Like we have to,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
We have to take action for something to happen. Whereas in this, keep listening, it's, well, you're doing this, but but the end result is not coming from you. In fact, there's no end, the end result is coming from Amida. The work is being done by Amida. The work has already been done by Amida. It's Amida's light that's already shining. That's going to do. That's going to all Shinjin within you. That's going to bring you to his pure land. All that stuff. So that's why I was asking. So, like here, like Paul Roberts, when he would say is, okay, there's like something I've gleaned from his videos and his writings. There's like 4 different aspects of kind of what he talked about with listening. One of which, the first part of that is listening with the head. So you're listening with the head just to understand the teachings, just to get the basic. Okay, this is what the teachings say, to whatever extent I can, with my limited bamboo mind and my karmic limitations and blah blah.
Yeah.
This is the extent. This is okay. That I understand it with my head. And then he says another aspect of it is you have to listen with the heart, to take it inside, or to let it, I guess, penetrate.
Yeah.
And that to me is the part where that's Amida's part, really, isn't it? That's like, I can't really.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even, I would say, even being able to, first of all, encounter the Dharma and then even understand it, isn't that Amida's doing as well? Actually,
yeah.
Think about it. You see what I'm? So it looks like, well, Amida, but we're deep listening. We're meant to deep listen. We're meant to work with a teacher, a good teacher of the Dharma. We're be part of saying at least once a month, talk about these things, and and we're meant to listen deeply to the Dharma. So what are we doing? What is it that we're doing?
Right.
So I'm reading the teachings, and I'm discussing my doubts and questions, and I'm reverent about what I'm reading. As much as I'm able, given my impatience and frustration and anger and jealousy of people who have Shinjin at time, or the whole, you know what I mean? I try to maintain reverence for the actual teaching. I never get ticked off at the teaching. I get ticked off at myself, really. But anyway. But anyway, so what I'm saying is, so deep listening, it's, so what am I doing? What are we doing?
What are we doing? Yeah.
Go ahead, you were going to say that's.
And wow, it's such a great question. It's such a huge question that I almost don't feel qualified to attempt to answer it. I mean, there's probably been so much said and so many great, wonderful insights, and I think a lot of it is in the scriptures themselves, whether it's Shinron's writing or Rinyo Shonin, or so there's a few things I want to say. One is about the being jealous of people who have Shinjin.
Yes.
So now that you know that there are people who have Shinjin for however long, and then don't have it anymore and go leave and join other,
Yeah.
you don't have to be jealous anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot less people to be jealous of than than previous. Yeah, yeah.
And that speaks to a larger point, which is that I would want to say that the teaching, you have to hear it as if it was for yourself, as it's intended for me. It's not for other people. It's this teaching that I'm hearing is really for me. So if you're hearing it that way, maybe there isn't so much room to be like envious of what other people are experiencing or doing. So the primary object in this particular case is myself, right? So if you hear it as being intended for you, it's intended for you. It's not intended for, So how can you be envious of someone who they have, other people, of course, they have their own encounter, right, with the truth. But for you and for me, I'll speak for myself. For me, the teaching is intended for me, because I'm hearing it. It's a direct, through Shinran Shonin, through all of the masters who have passed this teaching down, and now I'm hearing it. And they did all of that for my benefit. Well, Shinran Shonin says something similar. He says, when I contemplate the many immeasurable eons that Amida spent, contemplating to save sentient beings, and all the practices that Dharmakara Bodhisattva did, I realized it was for me, Shinran, alone. Those are pretty amazing, words in the history of religion, I think. And he didn't mean that in an exclusive sense. He wasn't saying it's for me and not for other people. That's not what he meant. What he meant is all of this is, in Buddhism, there's the expression, I can't remember the Sanskrit because I don't know Sanskrit, but there's a term for the Buddha's compassion, which means the Buddha looks at every living being as if it was his only child, basically. So it's far from being exclusive. It's the most, all-encompassing compassion you can think of. But in Jodo Shinshu, the real lesson is that all of this working and all of this teaching is really for my benefit. It's for me, So I think maybe if you see it as being intended for yourself, not for other people, it's not other people's job to, hear the Dharma for you. It's intended for you. So if you take that view, maybe there won't be as much room for, feeling envious of other people who may or may not have Shinjin. They may look like they have Shinjin and not really have Shinjin,
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what, when you were saying that, it's for you. I thought of that teaching that you quoted about that, and I remember when I first heard that, I was like, wow, that's very personal. It means it was an eye opener for me the first time I actually encountered that in the teaching. That's really personal. That's really making it personal, like it's for you, not just in the it's for all beings. It's
right.
It's for you. It is for all beings, but it's for you. It's for you.
Yeah.
Specifically designed for bamboos. It's specifically designed for wretched, evil, screwed up beings like you. And it's literally for you.
Yeah.
And it just kind of that was an eye opener for me. That was one of those, as Paul Roberts would say, aha moments about the Dharma, how personal it kind of was. There is.
Yeah. Well, it's a a subjective, right, perspective. Yeah. So without that, it's really important, really, in religious studies, generally, as the subjective experience is, of if it's just an objective thing, written in a book, it can't save us. We have to kind of, have that personal encounter, like you said, personal experience. So
I think that's why, isn't that kind of part of the reason that Amitabha became Amitabha, was to give us a form. Like we can't just, as badly Bambu as we are, we can't relate to the ultimate Buddha Dharmakaya. We can't relate to the Buddha nature. Like we can't comprehend that even. We can't even, how are we gonna relate to that? And so Amida gives us a form, a very specific form, and a specific name, and a specific. Do you see what I mean? Something that we can look at and hear.
And even exactly. And Shinran Shonin discusses that, and actually Shinran Shonin even goes a little bit further and says that the true form of Amida Buddha is infinite light. And he says that this light is the form of wisdom, and because the Buddha's wisdom is inconceivable to us who are unenlightened, we call it the Buddha of inconceivable light.
Yes.
So Amida's name actually is directing us to the ultimate truth, but we don't need to
reminding us inconceivable.
And we can't grasp it. We can't think it. In fact, there's so many great passages that I want to share with you, but Reinyo Shonin talks about Namo Amida Butsu, the name of Amida, as being, and this is another, well, I'll just mention this briefly, but important. Kobai Sensei mentions this as well. For Shinran Shonin, the name of Amida actually isn't just, Amitabha, Amida. The Namo Amida Butsu, the Namo, is actually an important part of the name in Jodo Shinshu. This may be a little different from like Chinese Pure Land Buddhism and some other forms of Pure Land Buddhism. But Reinyo Shonin says that the point when we reach the point where we've exhausted how we can conceive in our minds, or the words we can use to describe Namo Amida Butsu and the working of the name, that is the point where we call it the Buddha of inconceivable light. So you really can't, conceive of this with your mind,
Yeah. Inconceivable. I think of Princess Bride. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
Inconceivable.
Inconceivable.
Anyway, it truly is. It's and that's what it kind of comes back to. My calculating mind. I'll get so wrapped up in trying to understand and figure it out, and and then in those moments, I can't conceive this. What am I trying to do? How am I trying? It's impossible for me to comprehend this. Whatever aspect of the Dharma it is, past a certain point, there's just, that's not going to understand. Anyway, so again, coming back to the subjective
Right.
experience. So it's, like sometimes I just have to keep it simple, with that question about what's the approach, what's the attitude. Okay. It's reverence. It's the most important thing to me. And I just have to, it is the highest, most important thing in my life. And I need to just basically, kind of like we were talking about in the last session with the laundry.
Yeah.
The laundry's not going to dry if I leave it in the washing machine, or if I just pull it out and plunk it in a pile inside.
Yeah.
I have to undo it, put it on the line, and then the sun's going to dry. But I still need to do it. I still need to do something.
Yeah.
Or if I want the sun to come in, the light to come in, it's the light that's going to come in, but I got to open the curtains. I got to open the blinds. I got to open and the light will come in, but it's still the light that lights up the room. It's not me. I'm not lighting up the room.
Right.
So it's so I basically just, like, all I can think of is, okay, just read it and be as attentive as you can. Read it, listen to it, work with the teacher or work with it, you know what I mean? And that's it. Like, I almost have to just keep it simple, stupid, you know? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, and it's the thing is because Jodo Shinshu is often presented as a very passive, kind of religion, like but I mean, it's not like we can't just not do anything, right? So Kobai Sensei likes to point out that there's the passage I mentioned before, even if the triple thousandfold world were filled with flame, pass through that fire to hear the Buddha's name. So that's a passage from the sutras, but it means, we can't just sit on our hands and, in this burning house and expect that, God is going to save us or something. That's not how, Amida Buddha, first of all, is not, one thing you have to understand, very, very important. Amida Buddha isn't like sitting in the Pure Land, not giving people Shinjin. Shinran says there isn't any, like, Amida isn't withholding things, Shinran says that Amida directs this mind equally to all living beings. So there isn't any problem on Amida's side. It's not like Amida is like, because sometimes we hear, we use language that gives this impression like receiving Shinjin from Amida. So then we think, oh, well, Amida is like giving it, and choosing when to give it, kind of like he's like doling out Shinjin. That's a big mistake. That's not, Amida isn't like, God in the Christian, religion. It's not, so try not to get that image, in your head. We use language sometimes that suggests things, especially if you're familiar with Christianity, then you already have this code in your mind, kind of, and then you use the same language sometimes in Jodo Shinshu, and it can kind of trigger this, oh, well, it must mean this, kind of, So it's and that's what I would say. It's not like Shinjin is like a thing that Amida, installs in us at a time of his choosing. That's not the question at all. So just I would caution about that particular aspect of the Dharma.
I think sometimes that is something that's tripped a lot of people up. That thinking about receiving Shinjin or being given the gift of Shinjin, I think that tripped a lot of people up. Josho Sensei would point that out, that there's some people that have really are people of Shinjin, but when they discuss how that happens, it's not very helpful to the way, describing it that way. That, like you said, it's like it would. I think I would find this in the Trushin Buddhism email group. There was a lot of the gift of Shinjin and the Shinjin without really explaining what that. Now, Paul Roberts would explain this clearly, but often it just wouldn't get, and you just hear people talking about receiving Shinjin or being given the gift of Shinjin, and it just was never or often wouldn't be explained. So anyway, please continue with that.
Yeah. So, and then the whole question of, well, how is Shinjin received is probably a topic for another discussion, because it's a whole other topic
next time.
But I do want to stick. And it looks like we've already gone for an hour here, but I want to leave you with something that is very relevant to what you were. Actually, two things. So one more is going back to the feeling envious of other people who may or may not have Shinjin and so on. There's a great passage in Rinyo Shonin Goichi Daiki Kikigaki, which is a book of passages, basically recordings about the life of Rinyo Shonin, and also his sayings, things that he said. And there's a great passage in there where there was basically someone said, everyone, nobody actually has Shinjin, they only pretend to have it. It's a bit of a koan, but it does seem to be the case at sometimes. So, taking that along with the fact that the teaching is intended for me, for me only, is kind of, I think, helps address some of the envious aspect of maybe what you're struggling with. So, and then one more thing I want to share. And this is actually from an article from the Orange County Buddhist Church, but it discusses exactly your question about what is the attitude we should have when we're listening. And so it says, in the book, The Buddha's Wish for the World by R. Gomonshu Koshi no Tani. Gomonshu is like the head abbot of the Honganji denomination. He cites a temple in Japan that has hanging in the Hondo, the main hall, a sign that has the following creed about how we should listen to the Dharma. And it goes as follows. This is an English translation of the Japanese. 1, we should listen as if we are listening for the first time. 2, we should listen as if it is for me alone. And finally, 3, we should listen as if it might be the last time in our life. So those 3 points, that expresses pretty much perfectly the attitude with which we should listen to the Dharma. And especially the second point is what I already mentioned, which is listen as if it's for me alone. It's not, it would be, so being envious of someone else in this position would be like, let's imagine someone gives you a gift and they hand you this gift and say, here you go. And you look around and say, well, I'm envious of this person over here. But you're the one who's being given the gift. Right? So it's absurd to be, it's absurd to be looking at other people. You're the one who's being given the gift. You don't look around. If you're being given a gift from someone, you don't, look around at other people, right?
True.
Oh.
It's a very good analogy, actually. Very
And
good.
then
Yeah.
this article is kind of long, but I do want to share one more thing. Okay. Reverend Tetsuo Uno, who is actually a really good teacher of Shintoism in the United States. I've listened to a couple of his discussions of the Dharma, and it's really good. But he said we should listen to the Dharma as if we are listening to our doctor give us the results of our biopsy. Maybe some of you have had that experience. You had a lump or something suspicious, and the doctor takes a biopsy. He calls you back to his office to give you the results. You are sitting in his office on pins and needles. Will it be benign or malignant? It's like waiting for a judge to give you a life or death sentence. You don't have to ask the doctor to repeat himself, nor are you daydreaming, thinking about lunch or last night's football game. Your undivided attention is focusing on your doctor's words of the results of your biopsy. That is the kind of focus we should have in listening to the Dharma. Wonder what a wonderful teaching that is. So I think the point there is, the Dharma really is the medicine given by Shakyamuni in words, to heal us of our, bono, right? Of our big problem, which is that we can't get enlightenment by ourselves. And especially in Jodo Shinshu, of course, this means in a broader sense, Shinran Shonin's teaching, same concept, right? So maybe those passages help you a little bit with regard to the question of what attitude should I have when I'm listening to the Dharma. And if you'd like, I can send you those 3 steps, because I think they are good to keep in mind. So I'll send them via messenger.
Yeah, all of that you just talked about. Please send that. I wanted to say, I've been wanting to say this a bit earlier too, that Josho Sensei in one of his books does go into this and gives like 13 or 14 that pretty much encompasses everything we've just been talking about here about the attitude. And that is really helpful, actually. It's been really helpful to me. And in the Amida Dharma, his Amida Dharma book, the sort of, I can't remember what it's called, what the subtitle is of the book, but it's like the basic text of the Amida Ji temple, basically. But he gives a very specific sort of explanation of how the approach and attitude of when you're deep, of how and what to do when you're deep listening. And with the attitude you should have, the approach you should have, and it encompasses all these things. I'm realizing now that we're talking about in these different ways. Anyway, but yeah, thank you. That was extremely helpful.
My only issue is I wouldn't make it too, especially if you're having difficulty with, like, you're kind of feel like you're stuck in the process of listening. I wouldn't make it too difficult on yourself. Like, I have to listen, I have to read 3 times a day, and if I don't listen, then woe is me. That kind of thinking probably is counterproductive. I would more encourage, like, definitely listen as if it's for you, like a gift, being given. And then also enjoy it, like, if you're not finding joy in listening and reading and hearing about the Dharma, then, that's like a big part of what draws people. Really, just speaking about religion generally, I mean, people don't tend to be drawn to a religion that is joyless and doesn't give them any benefit. I mean, it should be something and especially Shin Buddhism. I mean, Shinran Shonin's words are always so, warm and joyful and filled with light and, inviting, really. So I would say if you're not enjoying it, then there's probably some problem that we have to,
there is
resolve or yeah.
Very specific, and that's something I want to talk to you about eventually in our Dharma discussions. There is a specific actual part of my questions and doubts there, which I'll in another
Okay. Sure, yeah.
The Dharma discussion.
Well, I think probably we've been going for a long enough time this time, but do you have any comments or thoughts? Was the things I shared today somewhat helpful?
And I listened to the previous one like 3 or 4 times, our previous Dharma discussion 3 or more times, and got more and more out of it.
Oh, good.
That's one of the reasons I want to record them. It helps me with my listening, because I don't, on the spot, I don't always, because of my mention about the assimilation thing, the delayed assimilation, I don't always get everything at that moment in the discussion. I listen to it later, I'm like, oh yeah, and so that's one of the reasons I want to record it, was for that reason. I got so much out, both face to face, but then actually later on listening to it later, so much out of it. So thank you. This is so helpful. I feel a difference already in working with Kobai Sensei and yourself with this, but especially since we've actually talked face to face, well, so to speak.
Good. Well, I'm glad that I can help.
Comfort level, or not comfort level, but just a sense of ease, more of a sense of ease than I had. So much more of a sense of ease about it than I had. Anyway, after the experience of leaving the Amida-ji Sangha, and then for several months anything, and just we were communicating quite a bit on text, on Messenger, but just made such a difference that face-to-face discussion. There's something about that is really important. So anyway, thank you so much. I got lots out of it. It's very, very helpful. And I look forward to the next one, whenever we can do that.
Great. And I'll get back to you with when we can meet again. Maybe not next weekend, but definitely for sure in the next couple of weeks, I think we'll be able to schedule things. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
It's great talking with you. So take care.
Yeah, you too, Scott.
Namo Amida Bu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Take care.
Bye-bye.